You ever get that feeling when everything's going smooth and then, bam, the universe decides to throw you under the bus? Yeah, that was me that night, driving home after an exhausting day. My mind? Half asleep. The radio? Mumbling some oldies. The car? Still reeking of stale coffee from the cup I knocked over earlier. Classic. I'm Marcus Wilson, 40 years old, just your average guy with a far-from-average job. But hey, we'll get to that part later. So there I was, cruising down the highway, lost in my thoughts, when suddenly, I saw them. Red and blue lights flashing in my rearview mirror. Oh, for heaven's sake, I muttered. Cops have this uncanny ability to ruin a perfectly peaceful night, don't they? And they weren't even subtle about it. Sirens blaring, those obnoxious lights flashing like they were leading a damn parade. All right, Marcus, play it cool, I told myself, flipping on my turn signal and pulling over. I reached for my license and registration because, let's be real, I wasn't about to give them any excuse to get extra annoying. I follow the rules, I know how this goes. Then they stepped out. Two white officers, walking with that kind of swagger that screamed, "We run this road." One was tall and wiry, sporting a mustache that looked like it had been slapped on as a joke. The other? Stocky, bald, and carrying that bad cop, no patience vibe. They didn't exactly radiate friendly neighborhood patrol, let's put it that way. Mustache leaned into my window, flashlight in hand like he was auditioning for a crime show. "License and registration, sir," he barked, putting an unnecessary punch on the sir like he was doing me some kind of favor. I handed over my documents without a word. "Evening, officers. What's the issue?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. No point in stirring the pot. Meanwhile, Baldy started circling my car, shining his flashlight into every crevice like he expected to find a stash of weapons or stolen gold bars. Spoiler alert, just old coffee cups and some gum wrappers. "Where you headed?" Mustache asked, eyeing me like I'd just confessed to robbing a bank. "Home. Long day at work," I replied, still keeping my cool. "Uh-huh." He grunted, like that was somehow suspicious. Taking my license, he strolled back to their patrol car, leaving Baldy behind to do what? Stare me down, apparently. And he did, arms crossed, puffed up, silent, just waiting for me to slip up. Minutes dragged by. The kind of minutes where your brain starts coming up with worst-case scenarios. I kept my eyes on them through the rearview mirror as they stood there, chatting and laughing like they were deciding where to grab donuts after this. Then, Mustache returned. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. That's when my patience started to wear thin. "Is there a reason for this?" I asked, my voice firm but controlled. "Don't make this harder than it has to be, sir," Baldy snapped, gripping the door handle like he was itching to yank me out himself. I sighed. "Sure, officer. Let's do this your way." I stepped out, hands up, fully aware of how this looked. Middle-aged black guy, getting cuffed on the side of the road, for no damn reason. The cuffs clicked shut around my wrists. "You're under arrest," Mustache announced like he'd just won a prize. "For what?" I asked, disbelief creeping into my voice. "We'll figure that out later," Baldy smirked, shoving me into the back of their patrol car. As the door slammed shut behind me, I exhaled sharply. All right then, let's play. Being thrown into the back of a cop car feels just as humiliating as it looks. The seat? Hard plastic and ice cold. The smell? A potent mix of old sweat and something way worse. I sat there, wrists biting into the cuffs, watching Mustache and Baldy through the windshield as they stood outside, still chuckling like this was just another Tuesday night for them. Finally, they got in, Mustache in the driver's seat, Baldy riding shotgun. Mustache smirked at me in the rearview mirror, his expression dripping with gotcha. Baldy twisted around, fake concern in his voice. "Got any weapons or drugs in the car?" I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you already check?" He grinned. "Just making sure. You people tend to forget things like that." I bit my tongue so hard, I almost tasted blood. You people. Classic. If there's one thing racists love, it's pretending their casual bigotry is just harmless small talk. The ride to the station was slow, almost like they were savoring it. Every pothole felt like a personal attack, jolting my spine while they chuckled at some inside joke. I sat there, silent, but boiling. I've dealt with this before. Black guy. Nice car. Middle of nowhere. Trouble always seems to find that combination. But this? This was next level. When we finally pulled up at the station, they yanked me out of the car like I was a sack of potatoes. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed, casting a sickly glow on the scuffed linoleum floors. The place smelled like burnt coffee and bad decisions. They dragged me to booking, where a bored-looking officer sat behind a desk, chewing gum like it was her full-time job. Mustache slapped my documents down with unnecessary flair. Marcus Wilson, he announced loudly, like he'd just cracked a major case. Brought him in for, he hesitated, struggling to come up with an actual crime. Suspicious behavior. The woman behind the desk raised an eyebrow but didn't bother questioning it. Instead, she shoved a clipboard toward me. Fill this out. I stared at her, then lifted my cuffed hands. With what? She sighed, like I'd asked her to solve world hunger, and motioned for Baldy to uncuff me. As I filled out the paperwork, I could hear Mustache and Baldy off to the side, whispering and chuckling to themselves, probably congratulating each other on their stellar police work. Once the paperwork was done, they shoved me into a holding cell. The door clanged shut, and I took a deep breath, scanning the room. Small. Filthy. Smelled like it hadn't been cleaned since the Reagan administration. A couple of guys were sprawled out on the benches, one snoring, the other watching me with mild curiosity. I sank into a corner, ignoring the heat crawling up my neck. My mind was racing. What's their endgame? Keep me here all night? Humiliate me? Provoke me into reacting? Time crawled. An hour. 2. Who knows? Then, finally, Mustache returned, leaning against the bars like he had all the time in the world. So, Marcus, he drawled, his voice thick with condescension, what's a guy like you doing in a car like that? I lifted my head, my face unreadable. Me? I didn't. You did that all on your own. His jaw clenched, but he didn't say a word. Instead, he turned and muttered something to Baldy, who let out a laugh, like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. I sat there, anger simmering just beneath the surface, but I reminded myself to stay cool. This wasn't my first time dealing with this kind of nonsense. I knew the game. Let them have their moment. Because when this was over, they wouldn't be laughing anymore. The morning after, nothing jolts you awake quite like the clang of a cell door and Baldy's voice barking. Time to go, superstar. They hauled me out, slapped the cuffs back on because apparently that was sport for them, and shoved me into a van with zero concern for comfort. Honestly, I've had smoother rides on public buses. When we pulled up to the courthouse, the place was buzzing. Lawyers in stiff suits, bored-looking clerks, and the occasional civilian wandering around like they'd walked into the wrong building. They marched me straight into the courtroom, where the judge, a no-nonsense older woman with a stare sharp enough to cut glass, was already seated. She looked like she'd seen it all, and wasn't impressed by any of it. Mustache and Baldy strutted in like they were the day's heroes, brimming with confidence. They gave their statements with the same cocky energy of guys who thought a routine traffic stop was an open-and-shut case. We observed the defendant behaving suspiciously, Mustache declared, voice thick with self-importance. Refused to cooperate. Had to be detained for officer safety. I let out a quiet scoff. Suspicious? Like, driving while black suspicious? The judge arched an eyebrow but said nothing. Instead, she motioned for me to speak. I stood up, my eyes locking onto Mustache and Baldy, my voice steady. Your Honor, I complied with every request. No probable cause. No explanation. Just cuffs and a ride downtown. If that's suspicious, then we've got way bigger problems than me. Mustache rolled his eyes. Baldy smirked. But the judge? She wasn't buying it. She turned to my lawyer, who handed her a folder. A very specific folder. Your Honor, my lawyer began. The defendant would like to submit evidence regarding his identity. The judge flipped through the pages, her expression tightening with every line she read. I caught the flicker of panic on Mustache's face as she glanced up at him. I'm going to need clarification, she said, her tone razor-sharp. I stood tall and nodded. I am Marcus Wilson, Special Agent, United States Secret Service. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Mustache's jaw practically hit the floor. Baldy went ghost white. The judge leaned forward, her stare now fully locked onto them. Officer, she said, directing her voice at Mustache, did you know this when you arrested him? He stammered something incoherent, but it didn't matter. The tide had shifted, and everyone in that courtroom could feel it. The judge straightened. We will reconvene tomorrow to address this matter properly. Officers, I suggest you start considering legal representation. And just like that, the script flipped. They had walked in with all the swagger in the world. But now they looked like kids caught stealing candy. As they shuffled out, I let myself smile. Just a little. Game on. The next day, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, legal analysts, curious onlookers, all eager to see what would unfold. Mustache and Baldy slunken, looking like deer caught in headlights. No swagger. Just nervous energy that almost made me want to laugh. The judge wasted no time. Her voice cut through the room like steel. After reviewing the evidence, it is clear that this case is not about a traffic violation. It is about a gross abuse of power. My lawyer stood up, cool as ice. Your Honor, these officers unlawfully detained a federal agent without cause, falsified claims, and violated his rights. My client isn't just innocent. He is the victim. The courtroom buzzed. Whispers spread like wildfire. Mustache tried to interject, but the judge silenced him with a glare that could have melted concrete. Officer, she said, voice firm. Do you have any explanation for your actions? He stammered. We didn't know who he was, Your Honor. The judge leaned forward. And you thought that justified your behavior? Ignorance does not excuse misconduct. Baldy tried to chime in. We were just following protocol. Protocol? The judge snapped. Your protocol does not include racial profiling and fabricating charges. You have embarrassed this court and your department. By now, they looked like they wanted to sink into the floor. The judge turned to me. Agent Wilson, this court apologizes for this injustice. Rest assured, disciplinary action will follow. I gave a respectful nod. My voice was steady. Thank you, Your Honor. I trust the system will handle them appropriately. The gavel slammed down. Case closed. Mustache and Baldy? Suspended, pending investigation. Likely facing charges of their own. As I stepped out of the courthouse, reporters swarmed me, shouting questions. I didn't stop, just tossed a single line over my shoulder. Sometimes, the bad guys wear badges. But the law doesn't play favorites. That shut them up. And as I climbed into my car, free, vindicated, I let myself smile. Justice served. Outro. Thank you all for listening to this story. We hope you enjoyed every twist, turn, and dose of well-deserved justice. If you want more powerful, unique stories like this, make sure to subscribe to Life Mosaic so you never miss an update. We appreciate you. We value you. And most importantly, we love having you as part of our community. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next story.
S.